Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on navigating VMware changes, how Sherweb helps you optimize and adapt. My name is Akila, and I'm an Associate Product Marketing Manager here at Sherweb, and I'll be your host for today. Before we dive in, I'd like to cover a couple of housekeeping items. First, this session is being recorded, and you'll receive a link to the recording along with the slides after the webinar. Second, we do have a Q&A window as well as a chat. Please feel free to drop your questions in there anytime during the presentation, and we'll try to address them as we go. But we'll also have a Q&A session at the end where you can also ask a question. And lastly, at the end of the webinar, there will be a short survey. We'd appreciate if you could just take 2 minutes out of your time to complete that survey so we can hear your feedback and thoughts on today's session, as well as what you would like to hear from us going forward. And now with housekeeping out of the way, I will hand it over to Guy to get us started today.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, wherever you might be. My pleasure to be here today on which is a pretty hot topic in the market right now regarding VMware. So we're going to share. This is essentially, I'd say, a business, more business than technical discussion and exchange and sharing of what we've seen in the market since the Broadcom acquisition of VMware. What are the challenges that it created, the opportunities that it created, what are the various scenarios that our partners are looking for, some of them buying from us, some of them new partners that happen to have VMware, they're also looking for solutions. So it's kind of a strategic and business exchange. Obviously, we'll get a bit into technical, but not that much. So this is an opportunity if you're in a crossroad with regard to your involvement into, cloud computing to say, well, here are the problems that I'm facing. What are the various scenarios that might be solutions for me, and how can Sherweb help? We can certainly help a number of those scenarios. With me today, Alex Jones, product manager, a very experienced person in the field of VMware and cloud computing. Jason Lambert is our advocate for Azure solutions. So we'll talk a bit about native Azure later. And Nicolas Bouchard from our sales team, who's also someone who has experience in our previous Hyper-V offering, right, which we moved to VMware, but will be able to share some thoughts about, for customers that are considering going to Hyper-V as a solution, potential scenario to evolve their cloud computing. So just a quick word about Sherweb. I'm sure most of you in the audience know us, but just as a reminder, so we are a very strong partner of both Microsoft and VMware. So for Microsoft, you can see like Partner of the Year 2024. We're also having a specialization in AVD. We'll get back into that. And that's particularly of interest for many people that are considering going to AVD. But we're also as a VMware CSP, and we'll get into like terminology. What does it mean CSP? What does it mean to be a reseller? But we operate our multi-tenant infrastructure VMware stack in both North America and Europe under our brand, which is Performance Cloud. We are also, since last year, when Broadcom transformed the market, we're what's called a white label, a licensing provider, or providing licensing rights, VMware licensing rights to so-called secondary CSPs. So we entered that market that was created by the Broadcom change of process. If you have questions about that, we'll be pleased to share. What we are not is a VMware reseller. We used to be many years ago, and we decided to focus on our cloud service provider offering, right? So any question regarding the reselling part, we may not have the full picture because we're no longer, we hear everything that's happening in the market, but we're no longer formally in the loop with regard to reselling. So let's talk about a few things. So we'll talk about obviously the acquisitions, the options that many of VMware clients have been considering in light of that acquisition, and number of the solutions that we can offer, so Performance Cloud namely, so our VMware stack and Azure as well. But first, let's talk about the structure of this post-Broadcom acquisition. So you may remember, I'm not going to go all the way back to the history of it, but sometime like a couple of days before Christmas in 2023, we got a note from Broadcom. And I kindly ask like whoever's not on the microphone to maybe mute because that makes a bit of a background noise. Thank you. So Broadcom made the acquisition. It was formalized late 2023. A couple of days before Christmas, we get a note essentially saying, "Hey, we're transforming things fairly significantly," and when we've been through all of these changes collectively, right? So I won't go back to everything that happened, right? You've been there, but just like setting the stage in terms of the route to market, right? So what's happening with regard to route to market? Well, there's reseller and there's CSP. Now, I won't get into distributor and whatnot. This is not really the main focus for today, but there are really two main routes to market: being a reseller or being a VMware cloud service provider or a CSP. Now, one thing that came up about a month ago is Broadcom said, well, you could have been both a reseller and a VCSP, right? And many of our customers were both, but you cannot be both anymore. So if any of the participants today are still transacting as both reseller and VMware cloud service provider, you probably received a note about a month ago from Broadcom saying, well, you need to choose. And unfortunately, if you do not tell us what you are choosing, we will choose for you. Okay. And if you're concerned by that, we can share more information. By now, hopefully, if you're in a situation where you were both a reseller and a cloud service provider, you have made your choice and informed Broadcom of what that choice might be. So on the reseller side, right, that's the classic reselling of licenses, right? On the VMware cloud service provider side, the way the market is structured now by Broadcom is you have so-called primary CSPs, which are have different statuses, Premier or Pinnacle, depending on the volume licenses that you commit to. And those that are not at that level have been invited as so-called registered tier, or the other terminology, secondary CSPs. That's on the right-hand side of the diagram. And as a secondary CSP, you need to acquire their licenses not from Broadcom, or you need to go to a primary CSP in the blue box, such as Sherweb. So we've entered into quite a few agreements with secondary CSPs strictly for their licensing needs. That's not going to be that much of the focus today. If you have questions about that, we'll be pleased to answer. The reason being that this had to happen pretty much in April 2024. So that contracting between primary and secondary CSPs was essentially a big wave in April 2024. And it's basically everybody has found their dancing partner. And now, the music goes on. And there's not been that much. Like, this is really about growing the market and stuff like that as far as secondary CSPs are concerned. But generally, they have found their partner. If you haven't, we'll be pleased to have a conversation with you. But for now, I'm assuming that there's no really secondary CSPs without a partner on this call. Now, the other branch, which is the one we're going to focus a lot on today, is as a primary CSP, we are selling Performance Cloud, which is, what is it? It's a multi-tenant VMware stack where our clients can buy essentially VMs, right? The size of the VM that they want. We're going to get into more details. And those clients, we don't really have direct clients. We deal with managed service providers, such as, I'm assuming, a lot of the folks that are on this call today attending this presentation. So as a managed service provider, you can purchase cloud services, VMware cloud services, under our brand Performance Cloud and resell them to your end customers, right? So that's sort of the ecosystem of how Broadcom structured the market and where we position ourselves in that market. Now, you might say, okay, well, if we don't talk about reseller, why is it relevant? Because news that are impacting the resellers, it's like a big ecosystem, right? And we're going to see that some of those news in general, the direction that Broadcom is taking is they're not really looking at small clients and small resellers as something that they want to encourage a whole lot. They're shifting their focus toward bigger entities. So a reseller might have, say, a few dozens, maybe a couple hundred cores. They might, contract for a very limited or very small footprint. Even tens, like 16 is not uncommon, right? In that channel. In our case, we're talking about thousands of cores, right? So we're abiding by completely different rules. Broadcom does not necessarily see the reseller route to market to very, very small clients as a viable channel. And that's really our interpretation, right, of the way they're making decisions that they're making currently. They're not necessarily going on the record for that, but we're seeing that the small guys is not, Broadcom doesn't necessarily want to handle them through the reseller route to market. However, the same way as Microsoft and many other companies, large providers have done, is the CSP route, right? The managed service provider ecosystem is the ecosystem to handle the small guys, right? Because us, Sherweb, as an example, we deal with hundreds of partners, which are themselves dealing with thousands of clients. So that's our business, right? The small clients ultimately is our business through the managed service provider ecosystem, right? So for us, small client is a very, very attractive client. It may no longer be quite the case for Broadcom to deal with that group of clients through the reseller market. So if you're to that reseller space, right, where you were potentially impacted by recent changes on the minimum number of cores, and you're saying, well, how am I handling an increased number of cores, right? Well, maybe the solution is that reselling is no longer the best alternative. It may be to start considering the CSP route. And we're going to get into more details about that. Okay, so I hope it's clear, but it's going to get a little clearer as we go through. Okay,
I'm sorry, Keith, before we go on, we
yep,
have a question. Um,
sure.
for secondary CSP, who owns the license, end user or partner? Is there a requirement for who owns the hardware?
No, no. For licensing, in the example I was giving earlier, like secondary CSP, we're selling licenses to partners that own their infrastructure. So they own the hardware. Okay, and actually, we're not in the hardware business, right? So, that's how we proceed. So that route, like the secondary CSP, I will be pleased because it's quite, as simple as it may sound. There's been a lot of we're working very hard with Broadcom to handle the complexity and make it simple for our partners, right? But just keep in mind this is a licensing play. The minimum is for us, we as Sherweb have a minimum to meet, but the partner don't have to worry about it, right? So we're buying bulks of licenses. We're buying thousands of licenses, and then we sell them to people that buy, a few, maybe a few, several dozens, maybe several hundreds. We're essentially playing that role of like basically the wholesaler that's buying a million, yellow ducks and putting them into all sorts of sizes of boxes, right? Small ones or big shipments. We take care of that, right? That's essentially the nature of our business. Feel free because I don't necessarily see the questions, so I know Akila just relay them to me. Hopefully that clarifies. Otherwise, we'll feel free at the end, or we'll just review the question toward the end. Maybe send something to the various participants if we haven't been able to clarify. Does that make sense, Akila? Is that answering the question?
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay. Okay. Feel free to clarify the question or follow up question if that wasn't answering the what you were looking for. All right. So we talked about everything happened, so no need to spend too much time on the year that followed. But let's just remember that we've all seen these things, right? We've all seen these different posts on various media, and some of them beginning sounded like, well, is that credible, right? It just seemed like everybody had to come up with a number that was more crazy than the other. But when it's AT&T and big players like that, well, there is some credibility behind that. What I can share regarding price increase is the following. Not everybody is in the same boat. In our case, right, the architecture that we were using made it translated that we didn't have a price increase that was significant, or probably like single digit price increase. And there are architectural reasons, I'll get back to that, but really, since our cost from Broadcom did not increase, we were able to maintain our price for Performance Cloud, which, as I said earlier, is our VMware stack, untouched. So our VMware Cloud, our PC offering, has not changed price, right? Through this whole transformation, the price is still the same. Okay. So we were able, through our own, by maneuvering to the architectural changes, adapt our offering or adapt our architecture in a way that it did not impact our cost, our internal cost significantly. And as a result, we didn't have to increase or change our own pricing when you buy, virtual machines on our environment. So why are we seeing 1,000% and 500%? And some of it is credible. Well, for instance, you have rounding rules, right? If you were at 16 core minimum and that goes to 72 core minimum, well, essentially that's times 4.5, right? So if you do nothing, nothing else happens, your cost is going to explode. So every customer has a different profile. Another consideration is the architecture. So let me well, I'll skip I'll skip to here because I want to make this point. I'll get back to the other slides. So I want to talk about ergonomics for a moment. And that's an image to understand why some customers are impacted significantly and others are not as significantly. And I'm taking a Trio for a reason is the new bundle offered by Broadcom. Essentially, you need to buy a bundle. And the bundle is composed of three main components. It's more than that, but there are three main components. I'm talking strictly commercial here. I'm not talking technical automation or anything like that. The bundle makes a lot of sense on many accounts. I'm strictly talking commercial. Well, if you go to a burger place that sells Trio, well, whether you buy the Trio or just the burger, there's some places where you're going to have the exact same price, right? So if like many customers, you're buying your components of your architecture separately, you're not going to benefit from what Broadcom is trying to push you to, which is to buy the Trio from Broadcom and save money. It makes sense economically speaking if you buy the Trio. And there are many reasons not to buy the Trio, but let's just say if you buy the Trio, it's going to be a potentially advantageous, right? If you do not buy the Trio, you buy your compute from VMware, you buy your SAN from another party, you buy your network from another third party, those costs add up because essentially you've paid for the Trio to Broadcom, but you're only consuming the burger, right? So that's in a way what's happening. In our case, we're with vSAN, so we're consuming the network also from Broadcom, and therefore we're buying the Trio, and that makes commercial sense. So that's a big difference, and we're gonna put some product names to that, I just did, right, in a moment. But I want to step back a bit and get back to some of the what happened. So I was talking about changes, the minimum of cores. Is it changing or not? We're going to get back to that in a moment. You've seen, we've talked about choosing between reseller and VCSP earlier. Some of the packages that were sold to the resale channel, like Essentials Plus, was discontinued. All of that pointing in the direction of if you're a small guy buying small products, it's going to get more difficult. That is not the stated direction from Broadcom. They want to deal with big entities. Some of those big entities are cloud service providers like ourselves. They would have to deal with one Sherweb and not the hundreds of customers that we have consuming VMware to our performance cloud. Now, one thing that we got calls actually from many of our partners saying, well, can you help us with, the recent announcement that you see on top of the screen that every order now is increasing from 16 to 72 cores per quote unquote command line, which we assume means per order. That's something that came out about a couple of weeks ago. Now, again, if you're at 16 cores and you have to jump to 72, that's a massive price increase. If you're a small guy, that hits like a percentage, it's enormous. Well, the good news is that Broadcom apparently reversed course. That's been reported in the technical press. So they're back to 16. Okay, so that created a lot of activity in the past few weeks, right? So clients saying, well, what am I supposed to do now, right? Now, I'm sure some of you on this call have been concerned by that. You've had maybe clients that were concerned by that. It's reversed. but it doesn't mean it's going to be reversed forever, right? The direction Broadcom is taking is consistent. They want to deal with bigger guys. They want to deal with big enterprises or big cloud service providers. So we're not privy to any secrets happening at Broadcom. But if I were a client at 16 cores today, yeah, you get a break. But I would not assume that this is going to be forever. And I would start looking at some of those alternatives that we will be presenting later today. Okay. And Akila, just want to take a quick break if there's any question at this point.
No questions as of now.
Okay. So it's talking about the Burgernomics. So saying like the trio. Well, what is a trio really? It's what we all know as the VMware Cloud Foundation, which is another way to essentially talk about a bundle, right? And that bundle, the three main components are vSphere, vSAN, and NSX for networking. You get a vSAN allocation as part of the bundle, whether you consume it or not. Okay. So hence the enormous incentive to consume the whole bundle because bundle is price per core, $350 list price per core. And if you say, well, I'm not going to consume vSAN or networking or do it otherwise, it's still $350 per core, right? Hence the enormous advantage of purchasing VCF, using VCF, or dealing with a company like Sherweb that uses the VCF to reduce our costs and therefore pass that along to our clients, when we sell virtual machines. So you're potentially at a crossroads saying, okay, cost has increased, maybe a bit, maybe a lot. What am I going to do? Right? Initially, there was a lot of dissatisfaction, let's say, from many of the partners. Many were saying, hey, I'm ditching that, I'm moving on. I'm moving to something else than VMware. And as the dust settled, many partners realized that maybe that's not really feasible, right? So, what are the different things that we hear from our customer base, right, with regard to their strategy? Well, one of them is do nothing, right? And actually, many of them have done nothing. Nothing in the sense like not just passively absorbing, but looking at options and saying, well, unfortunately, the best option is essentially to absorb that cost increase and not divert resources to do something else, right? Do nothing sometimes is the best thing to do, right? Because potentially other alternatives are worse, okay? So it's perfectly, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's not a capitulation or anything like that. It might be just a recognition that, hey, it's going to cost more. And unfortunately, we cannot, like other alternatives are not as viable. Another one that we've heard a lot is change hypervisor. And at the beginnings, many small companies switched hypervisor. We're going to get into more details on that. Okay. But in practice, it was especially for larger workloads or bigger partners, changing hypervisor has been more of a talking point than something that we really saw happening. However, some of the solutions that are after that, like the next four, we've seen some of that being whether executed or an advanced, planning stage. So the next two are essentially like kind of a variant of the same thing, which is consolidating workloads or re-architecting. Especially consolidating workloads, we have some of our clients have done that, reduce or optimize their the way they deploy their VMs in a way that they end up consuming less cores and therefore paying less in VMware costs. We've seen that it works, and we can help with that. So that's a very, very viable solution. Some of them have managed to reduce their core quite substantially. Obviously, as you can guess, another solution is, well, consider VCSPs like Sherweb. And a big advantage is that you remain in the VMware ecosystem, right? So in terms of refactoring and whatnot, you do not have to worry about that. We've done some very significant migration, and it's extremely smooth as long as you stay within the VMware space. Now, migrating to public cloud is also something that we are seeing very, very viable and different variants that we're going to see, especially with Azure. There are different flavors of Azure, and that involves different level of complexity. But that is happening. Those scenarios are happening, and we're going to get more details on that. So some hypervisors, and my apology, I'm sure maybe some of you might say, well, I know another one, fourth one or fifth one that are also viable or my clients are using, which is perfectly fine, right? But we selected the three ones that we believe seem to carry the most attention currently in the market. Proxmox was one hypervisor that gained a lot of attention early after the Broadcom acquisition for very, very small workloads, right? So many clients with very small workloads basically said, look, we just moved the whole thing for Proxmox. Um, seem to be happy with it. So, but I have not seen anything on the larger scale with Proxmox. Nutanix, well, obviously it's happening. We've had also clients saying that they were looking with interest at that. You can just look at their sales numbers. They've been strongly growing. It's public, so 15% per year. So obviously they're benefiting from all of those changes. And interestingly, we also have clients that are considering Hyper-V, right? That we've heard them looking at Hyper-V. Uh, and one thing we can share about that is we were ourselves having a multi-tenant Hyper-V stack a couple of years ago. We ended up migrating our clients to VMware, to our VMware stack. And one thing that we found out is the stability of VMware is significantly better. So our operational costs, I'm not talking about licensing costs, obviously, but operational costs have gone down very significantly when we shut down our Hyper-V multi-tenant offering. For those that are maybe a bit more familiar with the history of the company, it was called PCV1 a while ago. So that's, but it seemed to be enjoying some kind of revival because there was some thoughts that it was looking to be phased out by Microsoft, but for now it seemed to be considered as a viable alternative by some of our clients. Questions or comments at this point? Okay, so far so good.
All good, no questions.
All right. So I talked about the strategies to consolidate workloads, and here are a number of things that you can do. Obviously, right-size your VMs, decommission legacy servers, grouping similar workloads, standardizing your build. One thing I can share also is part of the complexity sometimes with Broadcom is what we ended up with some of our clients where the VMware is spinning some VMs that are not spun by the user themselves. It's called VCLS. That's a bit of a hot topic now in the VMware community because when they're spun by VMware, the VMware software, the cores that it's using are counted. So we ended up with clients having more cores measured by Broadcom. The meter Broadcom was measuring cores that they were not expecting. We've been working with Broadcom to look and address and find some solutions to that. So even if you consolidate your workloads, there might be some surprises, right? The count of cores may be a little different from what you were expecting, but still it remains, all things being said, a good strategy to reduce your spend, your licensing spend. Now I want to pivot to a couple of the offerings which are the cloud offerings, so Performance Cloud and Azure. Um, I'm sure everybody understands the business case for cloud, right? And especially the move from CAPEX to OPEX. Now, there's been talk in the press that, well, there's some repatriation. I think that's the word that's being popularized for that. Well, clients taking back instances from the cloud back to their on-prem infrastructure, and it's certainly happening. However, in the big scheme of things, all the big cloud providers are growing right now. So yeah, they may be having some migration out of the cloud, but there's so much additional business that's coming in that overall it is still growing, and is still the choice for many clients. So as far as clouds are concerned, we're really able to help in two counts. The first one is Performance Cloud, so the VMware stack, and then Azure. So we're going to talk about them one by one. So we started Performance Cloud as not only just a VMware based offering, but also the whole commercial aspect of it has been tailored for our pool of clients and managed service providers. And one of the thing that they wanted is predictable pricing. There are big advantages of going to Azure and the hypervisors, but it also is more demanding in terms of cost management. And many of our MSPs, small and not so small, love the idea of a predictable pricing with none of those somewhat unpredictable fees. We can all think about the egress fees, for instance. Egress fees in the hypervisor world is essentially like it used to be long distance billing years ago. Is like you were not quite sure how much you would get at the end of the month, right? You had an idea, but not quite sure. Now, for many MSPs, having the same charge every month is extremely convenient for margin calculation, for rebilling their customers. And that's what the commercial side of Performance Cloud does. So you're providing a solution based on the best product on the market, which is VMware, and you don't have any of the more difficult aspects of managing a hypervisor with the unpredictable or somewhat fluctuating prices, where you would need to do some rebilling reconciliation every month. Okay, so that's a big advantage. We're selling essentially fixed price per CPU, RAM, storage, backup. That's it. You purchase your pool of resources. You don't have. We're not selling VMs per se. You buy those blocks, CPU, RAM, storage, and then we're going to get to that later. You slice and dice it the way you want within your own customer pool. Okay, so you do that management within that framework that we or that total quantity that you're purchasing from us. So I look at our numbers every month from our customers, sometimes customers with the same amount of spend for months and months and months, which is not something that we would see for other type of services, which are more variable. So predictable pricing. So the flat plans, but that comes with, so you don't have to compromise. You don't have to compromise because it's VMware, right? Um, so the uptime is great. We are compliant with the main certifications out there. PCI is an example. You can go on our website. You'll see the PCI appendix on our service description with the RACI of like who does what. Right? There's a division responsibility, but we are obviously taking care of our own part as a cloud provider to ensure that ultimately you can meet your the PCI requirements. And as well as there is no compromise on technology. As an example, NVMe disks allow us to partition and do what was called policy-based storage. So we're no longer dependent on a piece of hardware called SSD or called disk or whatever. By going with VME, we basically drive the whole thing by policy, which is very flexible. And the underlying technology is the best best possible technology that you get. Some other aspects, so the reseller discounts, our partners have, based on their volume, their total volume with us, so you can have M365 security products and whatnot, and you add Performance Cloud on top of it, and you're entitled to our standard discount, right, which can go up to 20% depending of the volume of business that you're bringing us. Obviously, in terms of migrations, I mentioned earlier, that should not be a concern migrating from VMware to VMware. If you know customers or you have your own stack and you want to go to VMware, the migration is very smooth. I've witnessed one in Europe where a customer was changing location. We were moving those, checking quickly if the VM was still working. And actually, it was more complicated to get the hardware in the new data center where they wanted to go than actually moving the VMs. Moving the VM was almost clinical, right? You start, you wait, it's done, you check, finished. So very smooth from that perspective. We can assist you, right, with professional services. And I'll get back to that in a moment, so just hold that thought. We also have NOC services. Essentially, what we do is monitor what's sitting on top of your VM. We monitor that. We patch the OS as an example. So NOC services is a nice complement also that we provide. I'll get back to ProServe in a moment, but just wanted to emphasize here the Cloud Director. The Cloud Director is VMware's product to turn your VMware stack into a multi-tenant. And these screens essentially it's self-serve. So you go on the VMware Cloud Director as a MSP and you manage it the way you want. So you're completely in charge of the environment. So it makes it very, very flexible. Okay. Um, and you have full visibility and control of the environment you're creating. Now, in terms of ProServe, we have a bunch of certified people, obviously. Broadcom has announced a new program for certification, so we're slowly converting to our skill set to that. But you can count on us if you are concerned about the migration. Uh, Typically, all of our offerings, we offer a professional services help to migrate per se. But because of the simplicity of the migration, it's rarely something that's very expensive. Frequently, our partners know how to do it themselves, but that's something that we provide also. So very, very smooth migration. So technically, very smooth, but also from a human aspect of it, or in terms of project management, it's very, very smooth. Again, Akil, I'll stop for a moment if there are questions or
No
comments from
question.
my colleague. No questions so far? Okay, very good. Wanted to have a quick word also regarding a recent expansion of our IaaS offering with Wasabi. Wasabi is integral to our business for several years now. We when we started dealing with them, we were their number one client. I believe we're still their number one client in Canada. So we buy blocks of storage from them. So a bit like I was describing earlier, we wholesale their capacity. So we buy blocks of hundreds or petabytes, and we resell that. So if you have currently Wasabi, if you're direct or going to another provider, you can bring your business to us. It's subject to the discount, so you can have discounted. And we're leveraging essentially the deal. It's a multi-year deal that carries on for several more years in order to provide some very attractive prices to our clients. It's pay as you go, so very, very flexible. Okay, and you have all of the features here. We'll share the presentation, but it's essentially the leader of low cost object storage. And we've been using them for several years as a back-end object storage from some of our other services. And now we're essentially, selling the Wasabi brand per se, plus complement of some of our own storage solutions in Performance Cloud. So feel free if you have Wasabi to contact us. We can help. Now, I want to talk about Azure, which is, I was saying earlier, the other major push that we've seen is when customers are not going to Performance Cloud or to VMware Stack, probably the most popular alternative is to go to Azure. And before I introduce Jason Lambert, who's our advocate for Azure, I want to have a few words to introduce quickly. So obviously, you could just see the numbers on the technical press. Azure is growing very, very fast currently, right? It's still growing. It may catch up eventually to AWS. We'll see what happens. But right now, they have a lot of momentum, right? There are two solutions that VMware users might consider. So one of them is the Azure VMware Solution Offering. That's the name of it. Or native Azure, which is more classic Azure. And Jason will tell us a bit more about the classic Azure. But before I want to have a quick word regarding the AVS, Azure VMware Solutions. Essentially, it's a VMware stack within Azure and has some integration. So it's very viable. And many customers are saying, well, maybe that's the way to go to Azure, is to first go to AVS and then potentially go to Azure Native. Now, the challenge here is that this is typically for larger clients, right? I'm putting about 15K per month of spend. That's larger than most of our clients. However, if that is within your range of pricing or budget, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're obviously having strong links with Microsoft, and we can work it out for you. I'm assuming for the purpose of this call, though, that majority of you are not in that range of spanning for VMware, but if you are, uh, this might be worth like a whole complete separate session. Not enough time today to cover AVS, but if there is interest, for sure, we'll be sitting down with you for that purpose. Now, I want to pass to Jason to tell us more about native Azure. Jason, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So thank you very much, Guy. For the native Azure side of the house, you can certainly get, as you may know, servers in different families. So Microsoft has done a really good job of having servers set up to be, general infrastructure, or if you need compute, high compute or high memory, or like NVIDIA, GPU driven uh, virtual machine, you can get any one of those options. We have a pre-sales Azure team here at Sherweb. So if you have any questions and you're trying to figure out how to get from VMware to Microsoft Azure, you can certainly reach out through your account manager, and your account manager can get our Azure team connected, and we can help you on the pre-sales side of looking at what you have currently and what it could look like in Azure. Um, Microsoft has enhanced security, so if you consider security infrastructure on premises, even as an IT provider, you probably more than likely do your best to bring best practices to your customer's infrastructure. If your customer were to decide to move into say a Microsoft Azure, they're moving into an enterprise class infrastructure that scales the entire world. So although they may only ever work from a single region or data center within the region, they're getting best in class security infrastructure from Microsoft. Now, keep in mind that as I talk about Microsoft's best in class security, it's also on the customer, or as a provider, it would be on our need to provide best in class security within the subscription. So you want to make sure you're bringing, your best practices there as well. And if by chance you're concerned and maybe not knowing the best in class ways of doing, VMware deployment, or sorry, Azure deployment and or security, we've got education that we can help you with here at Sherweb that you can take advantage of. When you move to was there a question?
Nope, sorry. I
No.
was just thanking you for the that first comment. Yep, thank you.
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
Yeah. No
carry on.
problem.
Sorry, carry.
Yeah. So compatibility issues, that there skills gap. You may not have the skills to be able to take advantage of what Microsoft has to offer. Although you need to bring best in, your best practices that you would do on prem to Microsoft Azure. How you deploy in Microsoft Azure can be a little bit different. You're not actually, plugging wires and cables in. You're actually going through a wizard, a GUI, and getting those your network set up, your security groups, other pieces of that, whether it be virtual machines or storage. You just want to make sure that you have the ability. If in the short term you're not familiar with it, you certainly reach out to our team. We can help you from a perspective of recommending certifications and training. We do training here at Sherweb as well, to get you skilled up to be able to take advantage of Microsoft Azure. If you, let's say, run into an opportunity with a customer and you're interested in getting that deployed, please don't walk away from the opportunity because you don't have the skill. As Guy alluded to earlier, we do have a professional services team here at Sherweb, and we'd be more than happy to help you and your customer get that infrastructure set up, and get that customer up and running It may cost you a little bit in the pro service, like there would be some fees along the pro services side of that deployment, but on the other hand, your customer's set up, and there is also the ability to do some, looking over their shoulder to see what they're doing and how they're doing it along your journey. If you're looking
And I
to
want,
migrate, oh,
yeah, I just wanted to make sure also we cover a couple of topics, Jason. Tell us a bit about refactoring, right? What are the challenges around refactoring of application? That's usually a worry that's brought up by partners that are going from VMware to Azure. Is okay. What about my application? The stability is certified on VMware. What's going to happen in Azure? How do we handle those challenges?
that's a great announcement. I was just on that track going to talk about actually migrating from an Azure environment through to, or sorry, a VMware environment through to Microsoft Azure. Um, so you may have your infrastructure already set up in VMware. You're considering to look at Microsoft Azure. I'm going to put Guy on the spot and say, we could help if there's a need for a proof of concept, maybe to look at some application workloads that we're not 100% sure if they can run in Azure. We can help with proof of concept funding. I'm not going to get into the details of it because that would be a whole another topic in itself. But certainly feel free to ask for proof of concept funding. The other part is within an Azure subscription. So what I would do if I were you, if I had a customer that was, or you've got either your customer's already set up in VMware within your environment or in their own environment, you can go ahead and set up an Azure subscription for them for free. It doesn't cost any money to set up an Azure subscription. It only costs when we start deploying the services. Within an Azure subscription, there is a migrate tool, and within the migration tool is an assessment tool. And so, what I would highly recommend, we at Sherwood would highly recommend, is you take advantage of that assessment tool, and you can deploy it as an agent within your customer's VMware environment. So it will give you an image, and you deploy the image, and then the image will go out and start looking at the workloads that are currently running within your VMware environment. We would suggest that you'd run that at least a week, maybe 10 days. And then at the end of your week to 10 days, you can extract a report from the tool that will give you a good idea of, I'm running this VMware workload. It will equate to this Azure virtual machine, and I can get that set up as I decide to move forward. So then the only thing that I would suggest to keep in mind is it is a tool that is providing the information. You still want to bring best practices and your professional experience to the equation, because you may find that, said workload has a couple of CPU and some RAM, but realistically, that there's 4, 5, 6, 8 people working on that virtual machine day in, day out. And, you might need to provide on the Azure side, maybe a little bit of a beefier machine. I would say once you get, if the report comes back and gives you a pretty accurate look, you take a look at it, provide professional experience, and you say, yeah, these are the things that we want to do, and you move into Microsoft Azure, then I would suggest that the next step with your customer would be to work through optimization to make sure that, now that we've got it in Azure, we want to make sure that it's running efficiently and effectively to provide the best experience in a productivity perspective back to your customer and the users.
Thanks, Jason. I wanted to reemphasize, and I agree with you, the financial incentives to migrate are there currently regarding VMware to Azure. So that's something that we can discuss offline, but suffice to say that they exist. So feel free to reach out to us. That's a whole topic for a whole hour, so we're not going to be able to cover it. But we do have, and we're entitled to some of those programs as well from Microsoft themselves. I think that's pretty much. I wanted to keep a few more minutes regarding Q&A. Do I need to? I think I need to stop showing the screen at this point, right, Kila, or you're going to wrestle it back from me?
Yep, I'll let you know, but thank you, Guy, for kind of taking everyone through how Sherweb can help partners optimize and adapt to the VMware changes. I will now open the floor to any questions that you guys might have. As Guy mentioned, please use the chat or the Q&A function, and I'll be sure to kind of relay your questions over to Guy and get you guys some answers.
And while maybe people are thinking about their question, just to Jason's point, the migration process is something that is quite mature. So we have a professional services team that's taking care of that. And we can see here some of the points that were brought up by Jason, especially like pilot testing or POC, whatever we call it, in order to validate that your application will run consistently in the new environment. But that's part of a more holistic um, various step planning, from planning to pilot, migration, optimization, which is part of this whole experience of switching to Azure. Any
And
questions? Yep, go ahead. Sorry, Jason.
yeah, no problem. I thought, while people are thinking, I'd also like to just bring up the fact that we do have a very tenured team of people that work in our Azure business, both on the pre-sale side as well as the post-sale side. So if you, by chance, have maybe considered looking at Sherweb and you're maybe a little bit leery to the fact that maybe you haven't heard about how much experience we do have, I want to make sure that you know that the people that are here have been in the business for a number of years. We can help you create a migration opportunity. We can set up a statement of work. We can work through the entire process of what that statement of work would look like, who'd be responsible for what. We'd have a project manager, and we can give you a timeline from when it starts to when it finishes, and help you to make sure that your customer has a very smooth transition from perhaps a VMware environment to an Azure environment.
Indeed. Yep. Very good comment. Kayla, questions or interrogations from the audience?
We do have one question. Vince kind of sent in a question. He says, I have a client with 3 ESXi servers, Dell, running around 8 VMs of Server 2022, upgrading soon to Server 2025, and their licenses are expiring soon. Not sure if there's a specific question, Vince, that you have for Guy and the team. He would like to move them to Azure. So,
Okay, well, that is indeed a business case, because as we were showing earlier, those 8, I assume we're talking about 8 cores, or maybe it's even less than that, depending of your CPU to core ratio. But we're talking about a small footprint. So the 2 scenarios that we presented are very valid. So going performance cloud, if you want to stay in the VMware environment, or going Azure. So my suggestion would be I believe we have a contact at the end of this presentation. Allow me here. No, I think we'll have to share the contact separately, but essentially you can get in touch with our team, and they will work out, the right solution for you, the migration itself, and all of that.
Yep, and I just sent the contact information over to you, Vince. If
Oh,
for
very good.
anybody else
Thank you,
who
Akil.
does have any questions or concerns or want to learn more, please reach out to partners@sherweb.com, and of course, we'll be in touch with you and try to help you get things sorted there.
There's a kind of question. Actually, it points to exactly the pool of clients that Broadcom is slowly getting away from, essentially through the resale channel. They won't state it publicly, but essentially they're saying, like, if you are in that kind of size, go through a VCSP, assuming that you're okay with cloud, right? And that's a viable option from Broadcom's perspective. Or, as we mentioned, obviously Azure is also an alternative.
Perfect. We did get a question on whether this presentation will be shared. So yes, the recording of the webinar as well as the deck will be shared with you in the following days. So please keep an eye out for that. And I think that's it.
Okay, well, perfect timing. Well, thanks for everybody who was in the audience today. I'll let you have the final word, Akila, but it was a pleasure to actually put this presentation. And interestingly, we had to make some changes at the last minute because of the change from Broadcom that reverted to the 16 core. So you've seen that earlier in the slide. So it's a very fast-moving market. It's kind of exciting, but it's not an easy ride for the VMware community. So hopefully that we can help make it easier and absorb some of those ups and downs and changes of direction at our end so that you can focus on planning your business with your customers without having to worry about the settling, let's say, of this big new building that Broadcom's trying to build, but it's not completely settled yet. So but we're hopefully getting there with them. Thank you. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank my colleague. Back to you, Akila.
Perfect. I think that concludes today's webinar. Just a reminder that there is a short survey that will pop up for you after the webinar concludes. We'd appreciate if you could just take a few moments to complete it and provide your feedback to us on this webinar and what you would like to see moving forward. Thank you all for attending. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.